Where you are in television land. You have put hard times on me, hard times on this country. You don't know what hard times are.
Sometimes it's better to remain quiet and be thought a fool than it is to speak up and erase all doubt.
You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here.
That when I get him in the ring next week, and I'm not out here to make promises, I'm out here just to quote the facts. When I get him back in the ring for his AWA championship belt, it's going to be worse than it was last time, and he's going to wish he never put his name on that contract. Because I'm not here to pass out threats. I'm only here to do what I'm best at, and that is win.
Hard work pays off. Dreams come true. Bad times don't last, but bad guys do.
Welcome back to the Skewered Universe podcast. My name is Jeff.
And if you're wondering, Leanne's not here this week. She was in a steel cage match, did a shooting star press off the top, and she bruised her ribs, so she's out this week. But in her stead, I've brought on three gentlemen who know pro wrestling. First, I'm going to introduce the man who actually introduced me to wrestling way back in the day when we were just children. He is my brother from another mother. You may remember him from the video game episode, which we need to do another one soon. Eddie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey. Glad to be here.
Good to have you. Next up, he's also been on the show before. You may remember from our midsummer conversation. I've also been on his show, Invasion of the Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paul back to the show. Paul, how are you today?
Good. I would say that the best shooting star press ever was Brock Lesnar almost breaking his neck.
Jesus Christ, that was horrifying. I watched that live. My friend and I were at a sports bar, and
well, that's why we know he doesn't have a neck. So it's, it was proven.
And finally, making his debut, and I'm going to give him a wrestler's entrance here. I apologize for not doing it for the others, but a first-timer deserves this. Hailing from the house by the edge of the park, you know him from the Talk Without Rhythm podcast. He is the masked luchador with a beard that we all envy. His name is El Goro. Welcome to the Skewered Universe, sir.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Jeff. But I have to wonder if people really know me from Talk Without Rhythm, because I don't think anybody listens to that show. But I appreciate it anyway. Work the gimmick, man.
I'm going to call bullshit on that.
He's never going to break kayfabe about his listenership of his show.
All five of them. Anyway. Allow me to tell you the secrets. I am actually really good at ventriloquism and fake voices. So all of those guests you come on, they're all just me.
Ah, okay. Multiple personality disorder. Okay.
Well, he's a big Jeff Dunham fan, and I found that out, and that's what's inspired his work.
Oh, Jesus. I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
It's not. It's absolutely not.
Just you laughing.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. Thank you for having us.
Slightly less racist.
I got nothing to say about that.
All got hit with a dart.
Yeah.
So the reason these four guys have come together today, the reason I've brought you three here, is we're going to talk some fucking pro wrestling.
Fucking A.
And I know Eddie and I grew up watching it together. I know Paul has mentioned on Invasion that he's watched wrestling. And I mean, El Goro is a plethora of knowledge when it comes to wrestling. So I know his love of the sport. And yeah, I apologize. I kind of lost my words there for a second, guys.
It's all good, man.
That's what happens when you think about pro wrestling. You just got to take a step back.
Yeah, it's just, sometimes you just got to look at all those dudes not wearing a lot, and you just get lost in it. That's there's a beauty there. There's a lot.
Lost in the crotch.
Yep.
Call back to pre-show conversations.
Indeed. Kayfabe. Let's move on.
Yeah, let's put it this way. I was on the top rope and my footing wasn't quite where it should be, so I hesitated. So I was gonna try for that 5-star frog splash RVD style, and I just wasn't quite sure enough yet.
So my question is, I know you brought us all together. So I want to and the two of you would be, Jeff and Eddie, like you guys you grew up watching wrestling together. So what's like, clearly that's a bonding thing. So where does that start for you guys?
Good question, because that's actually a good transition, because I was going to go around and ask all of you guys basically the same question, like how you got started. I'll let Eddie go first here, and then we'll move around, and then I'll finish off with mine. So Eddie, if you want to go ahead and field the question.
To put it simply, I can't remember a time where I didn't watch wrestling. It goes that far back for me. Obviously I was probably like 4 or 5. My cousins were all into wrestling. They had the wrestling figures, they had the wrestling ring. They were watching wrestling when I'd go over and visit, and just slowly but surely got into it. And then I met you shortly after. And so, because when we met, it was just new for both of us, and again, that's why I think we one of the first things we bonded over was pro wrestling.
Definitely. All right, Paul, how about you?
So I think I'm the oldest of all of us here. So I remember the days, the Madison Square Garden black and white so I was watching like Superstars of Wrestling. I think I was watching the USA stuff. Like they'd have sometimes in the weekends. I remember what was the NBC show? Was it Friday night? Wasn't Fights? What was it called?
Saturday night main event.
Saturday night main event. I remember that. I remember Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, because if you weren't a kid watching Saturday morning cartoons, then you wasted the rest of your week, because that was the one time for you to watch cartoons. So I grew up around a lot of that stuff. It kind of faded a little bit for me. I mean, when I got to college, I remember. I was a junior in college. This was like 99. And I remember walking through my dormitory, and every TV that was on had 3 things. It was either Monday Night Football, Monday Night Raw, or Nitro. And you could just walk through and hear everything. And this is when the NWO was big, and like the back and forth fight, the Monday Night Wars. So that was always fun to get into, because you'd hear everybody reacting. And then it kind of faded away again. And until I'd say past 4 or 5 years, because I know I didn't really get the bug again until hanging out with with the Mr. Goro and other people that have like-minded interests in coming to a couple live shows here in the Cleveland area. There's the local promotion AIW, and it just that kind of brought it back, because I'd still catch the odd pay-per-view or like a Wrestle Kingdom. But just seeing that and seeing the these people putting on the show for various numbers of people in a gymnasium, and then seeing some legitimate talent come through, and it's one of those things like some people are like, you don't know who that is. I'm like, I have no idea, and then your mind gets blown by who they bring in. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of get back to it. It's just the way I kind of approach it now is it's a 52-week a year live action superhero comic. And I love the displays. I love the dumb storylines and good storylines. And I just love the effort and the art that gets put into it, because it's something unique. And it's even though the outcomes are predicted, there's still this wonderful you just don't know what's coming next, right? So it's come and gone. I grew up loving it, and now I dig it a lot now.
Okay. And El Goro, how about you?
Yeah, for me, the earliest wrestling that I can remember, it would have been late 80s, early 90s, where WWF at the time had entered into sort of a pop cultural juggernaut status, that even if you weren't actually watching wrestling, it was still a part of your life. I mean, my mom says she has a picture of me teething on a Hulk Hogan toy, the old rubber LJN figures that they have, and the Hulk Hogan that was, because he had bent legs, he could never actually stand up. He was always partially crouching. It was really weird, but it was just always just part of the background of my early childhood. And the first actual wrestling thing that I could ever remember clearly was when Jake the Snake had his snake bite Macho Man Randy Savage. That was the very first thing that I could remember. And, you know, I would go in and out of it for the next couple years, and I wouldn't get super into it until it would have been about right around 2000, kind of the lead up towards what is considered by some people to be the best WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania X7. And that's when I really started getting very much into wrestling. And I stayed with it for the next 4 or 5 years, roughly from WrestleMania 17 all the way up to WrestleMania 20, which again was an amazing card. And then after that, it just kind of faded out. And it wasn't until about 2014 that I rediscovered the love for wrestling, had the ability to sit down and watch it consistently. And it was all kind of wrapped up in the whole WWE thing. But it was also around that time, through making friends with various people, including my very good friends over on Trick or Treat Radio, that I got exposed increasingly to a lot more different styles of wrestling, independent promotions. Paul mentioned AIW here in Cleveland. I went to some of their shows, and in particular, getting really into Japanese wrestling, courtesy of New Japan Pro Wrestling. That was the stuff that took what was a passion and just turned it into a full-on obsession. This was the kind of wrestling that I could really get behind, that was unfettered by questionable decisions on a corporate level, unfettered by so many other things. It was just pure wrestling, and that's what really cemented me. And since then, I've just been a fanatic about it.
Very cool. Very cool. Nice. So Eddie did touch on this. Eddie is the one who introduced me to wrestling via World Wrestling Federation back in the day. So I was probably like 6, maybe, because I think that's about the time that we met, when I was about 6, Eddie, I think.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
And I remember distinctly you were showing me tapes that you had that had been recorded of like WrestleMania 3 or like even the first WrestleMania. And I was just like, what is this? And I was captivated seeing these like larger than life figures just going at it in the ring. And at the time, as a kid, I didn't know things were predetermined and that, you know, they already knew who was going to go over in the match, who was going to take the title, whatever that was. I was like, these guys are legit fighting. Oh my God. And that kind of sparked my love. So from there, I was watching, you know, Superstars on the weekends. I was watching Saturday Night's Main Event. When Raw came around, I was videotaping Raw. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah, video cassettes. Yep.
Yeah.
Saturday Night's Main Event. Oh, those were good times.
I was recording this stuff. I was watching all I could. And then as I got older, I kind of started to step away because, you know, as it happens, kids tend to bully anyone who liked wrestling. So I was like, oh, no, I don't like wrestling. But then I'd get home and I'd watch it, of course. And then for me, it was consuming everything that was WWF at the time, because I didn't really watch WCW except on occasion if I came across it on one of the local channels, because it was, in my head, it was a smaller promotion. I didn't realize all that there was tied into WCW regarding the territories and all this stuff. I think by the time I got into it, the territories were pretty much dead thanks to the Federation and Vince McMahon's need to consume everything and become this global juggernaut. So I kind of fell off, came back in, and then I fell off again around the time that John Cena was getting popular, just because I didn't like the guy. I didn't like his in-ring work. I didn't like his promos. I wasn't buying into it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, despite everyone else that was there that I was enjoying, I was like, this one guy has soured everything for me because everything is about him. Fast forward a few years, he's not there as much. So I kind of fell back into it. And then all of a sudden, I start watching old WCW stuff. I start checking out old territory stuff, finding guys like Bruiser Brody and seeing like Stan Hansen. And I know El Goro knows about these guys.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just kind of rekindled my love. We fast forward a few more years. I'm still watching it, still taking it in, you know, criticizing the bad stuff, but enjoying the good stuff when it would come my way. I stumbled across the now defunct podcast called if I remember correctly, I think it was the 5 Hospin Wrestling Podcast.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
Yeah, and that's how I discovered New Japan and learning about old like CZW and then GCW, learning about all this stuff. And I just started consuming it. And it just lit this fire that became like a passion that I had to just try and consume everything. So now I've watched a couple of Wrestle Kingdoms. I've seen parts of the New Japan Cup, and I'm like, wow, those guys just go for it. They leave everything in the ring. And then, of course, now my new obsession is AEW. That's where I stand now. Mm-hmm. So I'm always watching Dynamite, always watching Rampage, and I'm keeping up with New Japan and these other promotions because there's so much interesting stuff going on. Even Impact that I never watched. I'm even keeping up on their stuff just to see.
How is Impact? Are you liking that?
Yeah, it's actually not too bad.
I remember I was just asking you about that the other day because I was kind of intrigued with starting to look at some other divisions as well, you know. And, you know, because WWE, like I said, this storyline isn't great. And if you're not currently a WWE fan, it's not even a good time to get into it, honestly. But I digress. Yeah. What's going on in the other?
Well, I was gonna say, I think it's actually a good time to be maybe not the WWE's, maybe not like this is what wrestling is, where, you know, you watch Raw and there's, you know, 3 matches and 2.5 hours of promos or whatever, but there's so much other wrestling content that people have access to now. And even with the smaller, you know, companies, I think it's a great time to get in, because now you like Jeff was mentioning, you can go be like, here, look at this. Like, I am not well versed whatsoever, but I do know that like even like MLW has a lot of their stuff out there, and they're, you know, not the biggest, but there's names that you see that go through there. You're like, holy crap! Like there's so much talent out there, and there's a lot of different ways to showcase it. So I think now that Ring of Honor is going to be coming back too, like I think it's a good time to, if someone has even an inkling of wrestling, it's like you have such delights to show them. So I think it's an exciting time.
Exactly. And even more so than, you know, past periods where so many of these independent promotions and foreign promotions like New Japan were starting to get into the streaming game, and thus making their catalog available very, very easily to so many people that may not have been inclined to, you know, buy a DVD from some shady internet vendor. What's great is that there is a new spirit of cooperation amongst so many of the different brands. A lot of it spearheaded by the actions that have been made by people in Impact and the people in AEW. The sense that the days of kind of people locking down their talent and then segregating them off into their own little world that doesn't acknowledge the rest of the wider wrestling world is slowly breaking down. And so you can see talent from AIW show up on Impact and vice versa. You can see New Japan people showing up all over the place, whereas one time they were pretty much working exclusively with companies like Ring of Honor. The idea, and it's been colloquially referred to as the forbidden door, the idea that you know, each of these were their own distinct fiefdoms and no one could interact, that's breaking down. We're existing in a world where there's all this incredible possibility, and the kind of stuff that used to be the purview of fanboy speculation could very well happen. And so it is a very excited time to be in wrestling. And if you are not a fan of the WWE, there is an embarrassment of riches out there, particularly since we were moving outside of the pandemic era. People are able to go to shows again, and the possibilities are seemingly endless at this time. It's very exciting.
I think one of the frustrating things about being a WWE fan is, if you notice, I'm sure Jeff will know what I'm talking about here for sure. They'll start a story and they'll just basically leave you hanging with it. Like they'll just decide, like, you know what, we don't know where we're going to go with this, so we're just going to end it, and we're not going to mention it, we're not going to say anything about it. You just don't even hear about it again. I don't know if you guys have seen those situations, but
it's like Happy Days, where the older brother went upstairs in the first episode and he never came back down again.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yes, that was always something that was very frustrating during the time that I was watching WWE, and one of the primary reasons that I dropped off again that, and we were saying this before we started recording, that by no means do I want to badmouth the WWE, or more particularly, do I want to badmouth the people that legitimately enjoy it? Because I don't watch it. I try not to talk badly about things that I'm not actively in. I will explain why I don't watch it. And a lot of it had to do with, just as you said, those kind of trailing off storylines, or the idea that they would present a feud that would start, treading water for forever. How many times have you seen two guys wrestle each other each and every week until they finally have a blow off at the pay-per-view, and then they're back to wrestling the same guys each and every week.
Right.
And a lot of it also was, from a more personal level, people that I thought should have been placed in better positions, and not really them doing much with those kind of characters. People that got over organically with the audience, and the company, for whatever reason, didn't really invest in them. And it's other things like running shows in Saudi Arabia, but that's more of the political side of things. It's again, for the people that really enjoy it, awesome. I am so happy that people can find enjoyment in wrestling, because at the end of the day, we're all just wrestling fans. It doesn't matter what kind of flavor you're into. But
Exactly.
we do exist in a time where there is a very viable alternative, and there's a wealth of viable alternatives. There's not just WWE, and there's not just WWE and AEW. There are so many different promotions out there that can cater to so many different tastes. And hell, just go down to a local show. Almost, for most people, they may not realize it, but there are independent promotions pretty much everywhere. I mean, some people may have to drive a little bit further. Paul and I are somewhat spoiled that we actually have a really good independent promotion just down the road from us, practically. But there's so much talented independent wrestlers out there that would love to see for you to come out and check them out. And again, that's one of the things that's so exciting about being a wrestling fan these days, is the wealth of options.
Yeah, I definitely plan to start branching out for sure. And I've had my gaps in watching WWE, but at the end of the day, it's still entertaining to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's like something like the Cruiserweight Classic that they did 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, that was amazing.
Amazing. That was so great. Like, it actually felt like there were stakes. It felt like, and then you got you talk about the talent they brought in. What was you got to see Kota Ibushi. It was like the first time I'd ever really seen him. Amazing, right? You had him, Zack Sabre Jr. It's like these people that would really never really be in a WWE product were in this really cool tournament. And I was like, can we have more of that, please? But, that turned into 205 Live, then I never watched it. So I guess that's on me. But I just, they were trying, I guess. And so I'm not saying they're not capable of doing things. It's just when you're the largest promotion, it's easy to, not innovate, right? Because you already got the lion's share. So I could see how that gets frustrating, because it's like, they don't feel like they're being challenged, so why should they push themselves? They already got they've made so much money, even with the product the way it is. Like, who would be motivated to do more? That's
sure.
tough.
And it's kind of the sense of, hey, we cut to the top of the mountain by doing it this way. Why do we need to change how we do things? Why not just do it this way? And the fact is, they're still making a ton of money. So I don't necessarily foresee them being terribly inclined to changing the way that they do things. And if some of the changes that I've seen from a distance have been more them knuckling down on, this is the way WWE does things. And a lot of the innovations, a lot of which were spearheaded by people like Triple H, and 205 Live feels very much like an extension of the stuff that he was doing with NXT. There's not a lot of room for that in the modern day WWE, at least as far as I've seen. I don't want to speak too much out of turn, because I do not watch the product. I will follow certain things as they come up in the news, but I can't speak authoritatively about it. But it does feel like a lot of the stuff that laid the groundwork for something like the Cruiserweight Classic doesn't exist anymore in that company.
Right. I feel the same way. I don't see where they have room for any of that stuff. I mean, they've outright said they're no longer looking for independent talent. They're looking to NCAA athletes and things of that nature. I'm like, that's going to take a lot of time to get them acclimated even to your type of wrestling.
Sure.
But then again, they don't like the word wrestling. It's sports entertainment.
And to me, I mean, because I saw that same news, the idea they're not looking for wrestlers, they're looking for athletes, but more particularly, they're looking for established personalities that they can then integrate into the WWE apparatus. You know, NCAA talent that have social media followings, that have already a presence. And I could see the logic of that. You know, if you associate yourself with somebody who already has a element of fame, perhaps they'll bring new eyes to the product. It's the same reason that they have so many different musical talents being actively involved in the in-ring stuff. I mean, there's a reason that the Bad Bunny, I've heard.
So yeah, slight technical hiccup. We're back. So Goro, you were mentioning something. Let's go ahead and say, you know what? Go ahead and say the name that we said shall not be named. I believe you mentioned Bad Bunny.
Yeah, so I was just talking about the idea that as a strategy for keeping relevant, or at least getting more eyes on the product, the kind of bringing in of celebrities, which, hey, that's been a thing in wrestling for a long, long time. But the idea of kind of hanging your future upon existing athletic talents that are essentially bringing in a following from the NCAA, we'll have to see how it goes. I'm sure some of them are going to turn out to be amazing performers, because certainly a lot of very excellent wrestlers got their start as athletes. I mean, Bruiser Brody was a football player, didn't really work out for him, but he even said that one of the reasons that there were so many issues with wrestlers back in kind of the golden age, and why there was not a lot of interest in wrestling from them other than it just being a job, he basically referred to all of them as losers. They were all people that tried to be something else, failed, and wrestling was their fallback. So we'll see how if that will repeat with this new generation of athletes being brought into the wrestling scene, or if it can perhaps come up with some legendary performers like a Bruiser Brody.
Yeah, I mean, there's no telling. I mean, and the level that most of these athletes that they're going to sign, they perform at high levels at whatever they're doing. I'm sure they're not looking for third, fourth string guys on a team, or women who are third, fourth string, wherever. For their sake, I hope they're able to, you know, get into the system, learn the style, and have success. Whether that means getting the big push and being, you know, the next big thing, or even just being someone who is, I don't want to say a life mid-carder, but we all know there's those guys who are substantial for the mid-card that hang around there.
Sure. And the thing is, those guys are absolutely necessary. When you're building a wrestling promotion, not everybody can be on top. You have to be able to fill out your card from top to bottom. That means you will have undercard people, and that means you will have mid-card people. And while some people can float between them, other people will comfortably find sort of that middle of the road slot and still manage to have a tremendous career and be somebody that people absolutely love. I mean, hell, you can look at somebody like Roddy Piper. Yes, he had some incredibly high profile main event level matches, but if one were to look at the majority of his career, it's slightly more in the middle. Now, some of that has to do with the fact that, you know, he was underneath the juggernaut that was Hulk Hogan. So it's kind of hard to be on the upper level when that guy's going along. But nevertheless, he's still one of the most amazing wrestlers that I don't think ever won the world title.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say in that same vein, and I mentioned this to you guys, we were going to touch on it. I think now's a good time. Someone who was always in the mid card, but I think always put on a hell of a performance, and really, like everyone has said, was one of the coolest guys to watch. Scott Hall, or Razor Ramon, as he was known in the WWF.
Mm-hmm.
Always in that mid card scene, always around that Intercontinental title. But his matches were always captivating. His promos, you hung on every word. And the guy was willing to put over a very young Sean Waltman as the 1-2-3 kid, or probably even the Lightning Kid at that time.
I think it was
on
just
Monday Night Raw. Yeah, I probably was just the kid. On Monday Night Raw, put him over, let the kid get a win on him because he knew there was something there. Like,
yeah, Razor Ramon's character.
A guy like Hogan would have been like, well, no, I'm the top guy. I'm not going to lose to this kid.
Yep.
And I mean, we just lost Scott Hall. So real quick, I just kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on like Scott Hall, Razor Ramon. What did you guys think of his career and everything? So we'll go the other direction. We'll start with El Goro and then Paul and then Eddie.
I mean, Scott Hall was an absolute legend. Whether it was the character work that he did as Razor Ramon, the slightly more true to his life work as Scott Hall, but even before that, when he was working the various other promotions and he had that amazing mustache of his. I mean, he was an incredible performer. And unfortunately, he also personified a lot of the demons that ruled the life of a certain generation of wrestlers.
Right.
That there was an entire generation that sadly was lost. And those that are still remaining, they're becoming fewer and farther between. In many ways, it's nice that people can focus upon the good that he had in his career, and it was also nice that he was decidedly on a much stronger road to recovery throughout his later years. But it's still, you cannot talk about his life and his career without acknowledging the hard road that he had. But at the same time, I mean, he was an absolute legend. He was an amazing performer that unfortunately just had a lot of demons. Some of them pretty justified if you go into some of his background. I mean, dude accidentally killed a guy once.
Right. I did hear about that recently in all the news, and I was like, holy shit. Okay, that makes a lot of sense why he went down some of the paths he did.
Yeah. And again, it was just the life. I mean, these guys were constantly on the road, on the road 340 days a year sometimes. That takes a toll. And when you live in this sort of environment where you have this level of fame and you have access to all of these different vices, some of them you need just to keep going. Man, it is no surprise that so many of the people of that era have left, and how so many of them that remain are very, very beaten down.
Yeah, it's sad to look at some of them and just see what happened.
I mean, I think it also runs parallel to a lot of how just sports and sports entertainment, like the rise of its media share and how big it got in the 70s and 80s, and how these people were getting this attention and the lifestyles they lived. I'm not comparing what they do, because they worked more days a year than a professional football player. However, you could see some of those guys that left the world early too because of what they put themselves through, and then also having access, right? And there was no, I think that a lot of people that you see the health, there's a mental health side to this now, that those guys that went through it, everybody else sees are oh, well, we could still do this, but we could be smarter about it, and we don't have to live the other half of the rock star life. And I think we're seeing a lot of healthier people come through, and unfortunately they learn from people like Razor Ramon. So yeah, I just remember as a kid, he was the bad guy, and it's just, he always had that F you look on his face, and he's just one of those dudes that you knew what you're going to get, and that's not a bad thing. Having straight up heels, maybe you want a little bit more nuance sometimes, sure, but I for me, growing up as a kid, you're watching wrestling, you're watching cartoons, wherever, you got your good guys, your bad guys, and sometimes the villains are just cooler than the good guys, and he was cool, right? And I don't know how many forests he destroyed for toothpicks, but we also gotta remember that there's going to be more trees in the world now, and it's a sad reason, but there'll be more trees in the world.
All right, so Eddie, how about you? What about your experience growing up watching Razor Ramon, Scott Hall?
Yes, Razor Ramon was one of the great characters of, I felt like when we were kids, all of the wrestlers had more of a character, and they seemed to be getting away from that. But, Razor Ramon was just a memorable character, and I didn't really watch him as Scott Hall. So when I heard Scott Hall pass, my immediate thought is, oh, Razor Ramon. That's just my, when I see Scott Hall, that's Razor Ramon to me. But his character was phenomenal. It was just so intriguing. And fun fact about his debut, he debuted against a wrestler named Paul Van Dale, who is Carmella's father.
Huh.
And yeah, so Carmella's the second generation, and I didn't know that until recently.
I didn't either. It feels like something they probably should have mentioned at some point in the promotion she works for.
And I didn't know.
It's because he's such a.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Just because he's like such an unknown. He was one of those. If you guys remember back when we were kids, they would always put our superstars up against a quote unquote nobody.
Oh yes, the jobbers.
Yeah. So not to put any wrestlers down, but he wasn't known. And I think, I mean, my best guess would be that's probably why they hadn't really mentioned it. I think they missed a perfect opportunity when she was going to wrestle Charlotte. That could have been like, he could have even brought him out. But my guess is Vince McMahon is probably like, you know what, this guy wasn't big enough for me to bring out to have this match. I mean, you know how Vince McMahon is.
But the Miz's dad can get a spot at WrestleMania.
Yeah,
right?
he can. Hey, man.
He's a small business owner. We gotta support him.
Yeah, he owns a Mr. Hero just down the road.
Yeah, right. Like, he sells Roman burgers just down the street from me. I gotta support that. But no, I was gonna say I just didn't realize how protected the Razor's Edge was as a move until because there's one of the things I've been doing recently, and this is part of where I'm getting my wrestling knowledge from, is that you go on the internet and there's people like, if you could throw a dart and find 8 million videos about whatever. I try to keep it limited to one wrestling channel because I don't want the algorithm to completely blow up on me. But they like these guys, it's the What Culture wrestling guys. They're over in England. They do a really, really good job. And they had this whole like list of like protected moves. And I did not realize the Razor's Edge was like one of the biggest protected moves, just to show like when that got brought out, it was over, like that's awesome. I want more of that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, they're few and far between, but there are still some of those, very protected finishers. The one-winged angel comes to mind.
Yeah, very much the one-winged angel.
Pox was it his Falcon Arrow? No, that's not what it's called, right?
Black Arrow.
Hey, nobody kicks out of the Falcon Arrow.
Sorry, but I think, but that's one of those ones too, right? Like there's just a handful out there that you don't get out of.
Yeah, there's so many that are few and far between, but it was one thing I loved, and I'll go ahead and touch on like my experience. My first exposure to Scott Hall was as Razor Ramon, and I was like, who is this guy? Who is this like Latino guy? Not knowing he wasn't even Latino at all. I was like, funny part. Yeah. He pitches an idea to Vince saying, have you ever seen the movie Scarface? And that was the basis for his character. And I was like, this guy's so cool, but I hate him because he's a heel. Yep. But I still want to watch him. He's captivating. I was hanging on every word in every one of those vignettes before his debut. He made me start chewing on a toothpick because I thought it was so cool. And
like,
then...
Didn't Vince say he'd never seen Scarface and just let him do it? Isn't that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, do you actually wonder if Vince watched Scarface later and he was like, you know what, Tony Montana, I could do that Empire better. Do you think he ever watched that and was like, that's not, like there would have been a hard turn into the cocaine business versus wrestling. I'm sure he would have been like, I could do this. I got it.
I don't think Vince watches things. I don't think he watches movies.
No. His pop culture knowledge stops in the 80s.
Yeah. But not all of the 80s, clearly, because he hasn't seen Scarface.
Yeah. Like, that's why he kept giving people gimmicks that are like, you're a trash man. Okay, great, because he's seen them out in life, right? And he's like, you're a hockey player, right? Like, you try these, right? Like, what's your name? Your name's Vomit, because that's happened sometimes around me. Like, yeah.
Oh, God, he's gonna puke.
He's gonna puke. Oh, my God. Yeah. Duke the Dumpster Drosy is who you're referring to there, my friend. The man who was a trash man.
Sorry, like, but also, the best wrestler, the Repo Man. We gotta talk about him too, because or IRS, the guy that's there to make sure that he gets his money. Like these are all. I love these gimmicks of it's like, well, these are just jobs people have, right? So we'll do that.
Yeah, back in the day when everybody had a sideline, wrestling paid so little they had to have a full-time job.
Yeah. And of course, us growing up, we were like, oh, well, yeah, that makes total sense. This tax attorney is going to come in and totally be a wrestler, too.
Well, I mean, totally. it works for kids because, they're cartoons. It's the idea that you have it inherent in the name, inherent in the image. You know everything you need to know about these guys because, boom, there it is. It's this thing. So, but you can see how they sort of moved away from that in a certain sense. but still keeping kind of those core elements to the characters. I mean, we can laugh at all of the profession-based wrestlers, but lest we forget, Undertaker was one of those guys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we have a living dinosaur in AEW that.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I'm fine with this. Like,
hey, I fucking love Luchasaurus. All right.
I mean, I don't know if dinosaurs a job is more of a lifestyle choice, but whatever. I love it. Yeah.
Well, his real job is what? Professor of medieval history.
Well, there you go.
He's a very well-spoken and educated individual.
So the one thing I wanted to ask you guys about as well is part of the reason why I think I really have gotten back into it is that, like, sure, you got like, the spectacle and the characters. I think I'm getting more and more like trying to get into the narrative that goes into a match, like watching the back and forth of like, and I know the commentators help where it's like, oh, this guy, he broke his knee last week, he can barely walk. It's like, well, then he wouldn't be walking in the ring or whatever, right? But like, what was it with AEW a couple of weeks ago? We had Sammy Guevara like jack up his ribs because of that ladder match. That we got to see. That was amazing, but he still had like his ribs taped up for like a few weeks after that because that was part of the narrative. And then also as the matches would play out, you see people working his midsection. That's the stuff I dig because I think that's where that, like, not that I'm saying you have to be a smart wrestling watcher, because even if you're not, you're still getting the story because the guys are telling the story. These are the things I think I'm more fascinated by, is that the actual, like, the narrative that goes in and the physicality, but you have to have like one to make the other work. So I guess my question to you guys, I don't know how much you watch for that versus just, mountains of man meat, just, smacking each other.
I mean, that's a huge part of it for me. It's the idea that wrestling is drama, wrestling is comic books, wrestling is everything. And it is the narrative of these fictional characters. And yes, it can, kind of vent over into stuff from reality and the line gets blurry. But at the end of the day, these are fictional characters pursuing this, operating in a fictional world that we as audience members are invited to participate in. And it is great when they do have that sort of acknowledgement of the past, whether it be, the injuries that linger on from match to match, or when you have these kind of people acknowledging history between the talent. Just the fact of saying that, you can conceivably follow guys that have been wrestling in the independents in VFW halls all the way up to, stuff on major networks. And that's all part of a shared narrative. And that's one of the things that I appreciate about things outside of the WWE, in that they will acknowledge that sort of shared history. And in some cases, they'll actually build upon it in order to create new stories. It's like, again, it's like comic books. It just keeps adding additional layers to it. So that's what I enjoy. We can jokingly refer to it as, a soap opera with chair shots, but it's still, that's part of the appeal of it for me, is to see the development of these characters in this wild world they're creating.
Absolutely. You got your characters, the Junkyard Dog, you got Brutus the Barber Beefcake, Hulk Hogan. I mean, that Hulk Hogan, it was arguably as big as the WWE itself. I mean, the narrative is definitely a big part of it for me as well. I mean, without the narrative, if you think about it, you would be watching like a wrestling, but like a UFC. There's no real narrative to UFC because that's real life. But these are characters. I mean, Jesse the Body Ventura, that's a character. Those are the kind of characters that I miss. From growing up. I can't even name all of them, obviously, but there's just so many. There's so many really great characters that have come through WWF, WWE. And that's definitely the biggest appeal for me too, is you got to have that along with the physicality. I think he nailed it with that.
Yeah. And I think for me growing up, it was the characters that initially drew me in. Those larger than life cartoon-like characters. I mean, you had your Hulk Hogan's, your Ultimate Warriors, your Razor Ramones, your Shawn Michaels, guys who were just these larger than life personalities. And then as I got older, I started to appreciate more of the narrative in the ring. One of the guys who I think was one of the best at being able to not only tell that story in the ring was Bret Hart. I grew up a huge Bret Hart fan. I loved him in his tag team wrestling. I'll just come out and say it. I'm a huge fan of tag team wrestling, which is one reason why I love AEW. They actually have a focus on tag team wrestling, whereas WWE seems to consider it kind of a bad thing. I don't know why.
Just take a toy box and dump it open. It's like, hey, you guys are a tag team now. Good luck with that. Have fun. Like, what? Who?
Yeah.
Especially the women's division. They're just like, just plug and play. Like, oh, who's Rhea Ripley going to lose with this week? You know, like it's very frustrating. So yeah.
I was just talking to my wife about this last week, how tag teams are just all slapped together now. And back in the day, they used to always have like an actual tag team. They had the same uniform on, same gimmick, and everything matched, and they were like an actual tag team. Now it's like, oh yeah, slap these two together for 3 weeks.
Well, they had the tag team name. It wasn't just person A, person B. They, it was a name, it was a unit, and it would always irritate me, just like Paul was saying, where they would kind of slap these two guys together, and then they would go on to beat established tag teams. So it's this like, okay, so people who make this their entire specialty are losing against just two yahoos that you threw together just because those guys are bigger names individually. That's not something that should ever happen, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's why, I think Arcade Bro kind of succeeded in spite of itself.
I was just thinking that,
because they're a lot of fun, and it's like they work so well together, and like I don't know, just seeing Randy Orton smile sometimes just blows my mind now.
The character development with Orton has been amazing, right?
Just like he's having fun. And I'm like, so the world's over, right? Is that what's going on? Like Randy Orton smiling, so we're all doomed. Is that what's going on?
Exactly.
But yeah, so Jeff, speaking to your point about tag team wrestling, I'm sorry I interrupted. So
no. I'm just saying I love tag team wrestling, which is what my exposure to Bret Hart was early in my days watching WWF. And when I started to appreciate what he was doing in the ring, the story he was telling, the selling of certain moves, if somebody was working over his leg, he was limping the entire match. And he was just one of those guys that I was drawn to, because I was like, he's telling a story in the ring with his actions and what he's doing. And now we see more of that in some of these other guys. And I get there are some matches where the selling is minimal because it's a bunch of high spots. And I know a lot of people don't like that. I like that as an alternative to those hard storytelling matches. It's just something fun to watch every once in a while. I mean, you put the Young Bucks and like Jurassic Express together with some other guys that could just jump around and do these flips and everything. I don't mind that. It's a fun, kind of check out for a minute, watch the high spots, watch the crazy moves. Lucha Brothers come to mind, actually. That's what I was thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
And just enjoy it for the fun spectacle it is. But then you can turn around and you can watch a match like CM Punk and Eddie Kingston, where these guys are just telling this story, which stems from real life dislike of each other because of things that happened back in like Ring of Honor locker rooms. And it's just so good to watch them just tell this story in the ring, and it's captivating. And I think that's where I'm at now, is that work in the ring, that storytelling in the ring that draws you in. And don't get me wrong, I love watching the spots. I love seeing the moves hit, but it's that storytelling. It's somebody working over an arm and that person, holding their arm or hitting a move and then like immediately grabbing their arm or grabbing their ribs. They're taped up the next time they come out, or they're still limping. Whereas what I've seen in WWE, and I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to badmouth them. I'm not trying to talk shit or anything. I don't keep up enough with the product. I keep up with it in news or like big stories and what's going on, who's been released, who's been signed, things like that. They seem to not have guys sell a big injury like the next night. Like a WrestleMania, they could get put through 2 tables and have, make it look like their leg was Pillmanized in a chair. And then the next night on Raw, they're coming out dancing down the aisle. I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't recover that quick. I know this is all predetermined and you didn't really get injured, but give us something.
Yeah, I think like other promotions, like especially, well, it's tougher for, I think, for some of the like the smaller indies, because like I'll go to a show every few months, but so I don't catch all the storylines, but at least they're still working to tell a story at the moment, at the time, while you're in there watching. And then there's also that kind of like, it's kind of like watching a magic act, right? Where we know we're there to be fooled, and we get our minds blown when we are, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's like, I think that's fun because, like, and it's just these people, like, some of the stuff they do, there has to be so much trust, right? And familiarity for the most part to make these things possible. And not to say that this stuff doesn't hurt, because it looks like a lot of times it does. So, if that's how you kind of enjoy your workplace, that's, I mean, fine. I couldn't do my place of work and be like, what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go get the shit beat out of me physically and emotionally. I only get the emotional part. I don't need the physical part of my job. But no, but it's just like I don't know, like not to, like, there was a point, what was it? Goro and I were at the show at a bar, and Nick Gage was there, and it's like being near a live like tiger.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was coming, there's a bit you and I backed up because he went against the barricades. I'm like, that guy, there's blood on him. It's probably not his. And also, he's fascinating to watch, but I do not want to be within arm's distance of him because he terrifies me.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, hell, I was at another AIW show back when they were at the at Mount Carmel.
Oh yeah,
for the benefit of everybody else. AIW, again, it's Absolute Intense Wrestling out of Cleveland, but they used to run shows out of a Catholic high school gymnasium with a gigantic, two gigantic portraits, one of a pope, the other one of the tiger. It was an amazing venue.
Wow.
Dang, you gotta start somewhere, huh?
And they would put on these brutal shows. And that was one of the first times I ever saw Eddie Kingston was at one of those shows. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he actually fell into me because they were brawling up their little bleachers that we were sitting on. And that's one of those things the purest wrestling gets. And, this it goes into what one of the biggest criticisms about wrestling is, like, oh, it's fake. It's like, yes, we all know it's fake. But when wrestling is at its best is when you can forget it, just like Paul was saying. And the more you watch wrestling, the more you kind of get an idea of the stories that are being told. You can start predicting certain things. You can start thinking, okay, this is most likely going to go this way, so then they can do this. This is the logical payoff of this, all of those things. But when wrestling is great, is those moments where all of your prior knowledge, all of your cynicism just goes away, and you are invested in what is happening, where the match could go either way, or even better, when you really want it to go one way, and it really feels like it's going to go that way. And those near falls have meaning. You want the match to be over to see that your guy, have his arm raised at the end of that. That is when wrestling is at its absolute most amazing. And it's not always that, it's not always that. But I think that's one of the reasons that people get so wrapped up in wrestling, because when those moments happen, few other things in life, at least in terms of entertainment, can compare to it.
Agreed.
Yeah, indeed.
I had that experience with and Goro, you'll know this. I'm not sure if Paul and Eddie will know this match, but Tomohiro Ishii versus Jon Moxley. That was one of those matches where everything I knew just got put to the side, and I was watching two guys just headbutt the shit out of each other.
Ooh,
and my God, I mean, Ishii is already built like a brick shithouse, and I would not want to fight that man. Although I would take him over Minoru Suzuki any day.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then you put him in there with Moxley, who once I saw Mox in AEW, and then I went back and saw where he came from, the pre-WWE stuff.
Ooh,
I was like, oh, okay, this guy's fucking insane and will do whatever it takes. Okay. All right. And then Ishii was like, you can hit me, you can throw me through a table. I'm going to get back up. They don't call me the Stone Pitbull for any reason. All right, so another technical snafu. I don't remember where we left off, guys. Does anybody remember exactly where we were at?
Talking about like the physicality of wrestlers. You had mentioned the one match with Mox and the Stone Pitbull, and how that was like your big like moment where everything kind of disappeared. You're just in the match,
right? Right. Yeah. Right. That's what it was. Okay. Yeah, that was the moment where I just kind of put all my previous knowledge aside and just enjoyed the match, just was watching everything, and I was, groaning at some of the spots, and just it got brutal.
And that's the thing, again, it speaks to the great variety of wrestling out there, that there are so many different ways that you can put together a wrestling match. And your taste is going to depend or play a big part in what you find the most appealing. But you could have the bloodiest, most brutal match out there, and you can also have just the goofiest, softest thing. There's so many different styles of wrestling available to you out there.
That is true. I mean, you can watch a Nick Gage match and then turn around the next second and you're watching an Orange Cassidy match or a Danhausen match.
Sure.
And they're on different levels, but sometimes they can do the exact same thing where you're just watching it for what's happening. And you're like, you know what? I'm just caught up in what's happening right now.
Yeah. I mean, each of those different match styles will have its own style of narrative. There is a sense amongst some people that the death matches are just, people hitting each other over the head with stuff, and there's no psychology to it. And in some cases, yeah, that's true. There's also sometimes not much good psychology in a traditional wrestling match. It all depends upon the talent of the people involved in the match. And the language can vary from style to style. But the more you get into it, the more you start picking up on some of those little nuances. And somehow it can elevate the entire proceedings. And that's, again, one of the things that's so great about wrestling. The more you invest in it, the more you learn about all of these different elements going into it, the more enjoyment you will get out of the final match.
It's exactly the case. There was a match, I think it was CM Punk versus Darby Allin, and somebody posted up a side-by-side comparison with the Bret Hart match, and the spots were exact. It was just like a callback to that match. And I'm like, you know what? If you weren't looking for it, you'd never know. But then seeing it side by side, I was like, that's brilliant, because they didn't have to call back, but somebody was like, let's call back to one of the old matches. Let's see who picks up on it.
Mm-hmm. Or hell, even just the program that CM Punk just finished with MJF, culminating in their big dog collar match, and all of the callbacks to Punk's run in Ring of Honor, from him coming out to AFI to even MJF at points echoing a promo that Punk had previously cut during his feud with Raven. It rewards, and not everybody does this, but the best promotions will reward your paying attention. They will reward your loyalty to the history of these performers. And it feels like such an obvious thing that you wonder why more people don't do it, especially with some of these more tenured performers that have decades and hundreds of matches underneath their belt, hundreds of stories and interactions. If you can, acknowledge that, and it doesn't take much, all you have to do is acknowledge it. It rewards the people that, were there from the beginning or took their time to learn more about it. And for the people that aren't familiar with it, when they get clued in that this is a reference, they'll be inclined to go check it out. I hadn't seen that dog collar match with him and Raven, but I went out and tracked it down after that.
I have to do that, because I didn't get to watch Revolution, so I caught everything on like YouTube and whatever else I could find for clips and stuff like that. And seeing all that, and then seeing the comparison to the Ring of Honor days of Punk doing that same thing, I was like, this is good stuff, because it's rewarding those fans that pay attention. And even if you're a newer fan, you can see it and be like, well, I don't understand it, but that maybe, it makes them go back and appreciate some of the stuff that came before.
Well, I'll give the example. Like, I didn't know about any of that, and until you guys just talked about it. So there you go. I'm the noob. And so, but watching, I got the opportunity to watch the pay-per-view. I watched it with my wife. Like, she'll watch wrestling like once every 6 months. It's fine, because it's like we were just us watching, and I explained a little bit about what was going on. And so when we got to that match, like, there was a lot of like groaning and twisting in our seats while watching it. But just because I didn't catch specific, callbacks to promos cut or match types, doesn't mean that I wasn't getting just a bloody feast of a match to really dig into, and I still felt that I was rewarded and I was still satisfied, because I think that's a tight line to walk, right? I think it's good to reward people that pay attention to long form storytelling, but it's also like, hey, is this your first dog collar match? Well, this is going to be the one burned in your head forever,
Exactly.
And it's like it still worked for me, even though I knew about like kind of the callback to the older music, just because I know that it wasn't the song that his regular entrance music. And I found out like the next day, like, oh, there's a whole thing with that. And I was like, that's cool. Right. Like that's, but in the moment it did not take a single thing away. I was there to see, cause I already knew about the lead up, and I was wanting to see these two guys just tear each other apart. And that's what I got. And it was very rewarding.
Yeah. And that's good storytelling.
Yeah, right. That's the same. It's like with anything, right? Like you mentioned, like comic books, and even like now that we're getting all this glut of like comic book movies, sometimes it doesn't hurt to be like, hey, you're new to this, come check this out. You don't need to watch 87 Marvel films to watch this one. Like I think there's a certain barrier for entry that I think wrestling does a good job with, and so yeah, I think that I know, especially there's a lot of people I know that like, well, I'm not really into wrestling. It's your taste may vary. I would argue it's the same thing with like music or like movies. It's like you may not think you are, but you haven't found the thing that got you into it yet. And I think wrestling, there's plenty of that, right? Like, and I think maybe people aren't going to be diehards, but I think there's plenty out there to be like, you know what, that was enjoyable, and that's why I also like go to live shows. Like, oh my goodness, like I think you convert mini fans if you take somebody to a live indie show.
Yeah, though we did definitively find out, due to her going to the live show when AEW came through, that Stephanie is most assuredly not a wrestling fan.
And I'm not saying this to besmirch her in any way, but nobody's perfect.
It's perfectly fine. We're allowed our own individual interests.
Exactly.
And I give her nothing but credit that she went to the show with me, and she went into the deep end on that kind of thing, because a big wrestling show, that's a lot. Mm-hmm. And I also had the opinion that, seeing it live is a completely different experience, and there's an energy there. But for some people, it's not going to, resonate with them, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But for the faithful, man, there are a few things as great as live wrestling. Whether it's the small shows that of the likes of AIW, or the major shows like WWE or AEW, it's an amazing experience, and I highly encourage anybody who, with any sort of interest in wrestling, go to live wrestling. Doesn't matter if it's a small show, just go. It's amazing.
Right. And I've been to a few live shows in my day. All WWF, of course, because that's how it goes.
Sure.
I didn't know about any of the indies, but I've been to several Raw and SmackDown tapings locally here in Southern California, and LA and Anaheim. And I got the chance.
You're in a great spot too for independent wrestling. You're in PWG territory.
Right. And I just found out not that long ago that they're pretty close. I'm like, well, son of a bitch.
Now and AEW is coming out your way soon, because they're going to be putting a show outside of Rancho Cucamonga.
Yes, they are. And I am excited for them to come, and I'm hoping that things work out where I can be able to go.
Isn't that where like New Japan, don't they have like a base of operations over in California too? Like, don't they have like an American portion, or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, I don't remember where the New Japan dojo is. I think it's in LA.
Yeah, it's in LA somewhere. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
But I also got the chance to go to WrestleMania 2000. A buddy of mine somehow was able to score tickets from somebody at not too bad of a price. I mean, we weren't front row or anything. We were pretty high up, and Eddie will know this, at the Arrowhead Pond, which is now the Honda Center, because everything's got to be corporate branded now.
Boo.
Yeah.
Although I guess Arrowhead Pond was still kind of
another.
branded, but the pond makes sense for a hockey arena, where Honda Center, but that's a whole conversation for a different podcast.
Well, not to mention they're ducks, so ducks on the pond. Huh. Anyways.
Well, what do I know?
We got to go to a WrestleMania though. That would be like a bucket list thing if I got the opportunity and it made sense. I think I'd be, regardless of how I feel about the product, I would go to a WrestleMania.
It's like the Super Bowl of wrestling, kind of. I mean, it's one of those events that even if you don't watch wrestling, you can go to WrestleMania. Who's going to say no to that?
Right. So when I had the opportunity, of course, I jumped on it. And while WrestleMania 2000 isn't the greatest WrestleMania looking back, I've gone back and watched it. I just had fun being there live because it's such a different experience. You're hearing the music live for these entrances. You're seeing these guys in the ring. And even though we were fairly far away, we had sort of a bird's eye view of everything going on. So we could still tell what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, but the best experience I had, not saying anything was wrong with my WrestleMania, attendance, but the house shows that they put on, those were the shows to attend because you could get close and you could see everything. And then you realize just how big some of these guys are. But I'll tell you this, at the time I was going, it was probably 98, 99. So right in the midst of the Attitude Era.
Mm-hmm.
When Kane would come out and set the pyro off from the ring posts, we were 3 rows back, and I felt like my eyebrows got fucking singed off, man, because it was that hot.
Yeah, anytime they use live fire, you get a sense of just damn how hot that is. I mean, hell, when Cody was coming out, I was a distance away, and I was still feeling the heat of the flame.
Yeah. Even I went to that Raw taping a couple weeks ago because I don't know why it happened, but I went to my first professional show, that AEW show, and then 3 weeks later I went to a Raw taping. It's like I should have spaced this out better, but it's like completely different experiences. But they would use the fireworks and some of the pyro at the Raw taping, and it was just like you could just feel the temperature just go up in the in the arena. You're like, whew, that's scary. I don't know. I don't know. Man's natural inclination to be afraid of fire really kicked in during some of them.
At least you didn't have a sign catch on fire.
Heat.
Yeah.
You feel that wave of heat. It definitely is alarming.
Yeah, and you're right. I didn't have a sign catch on fire, though it was cracked above me, and I was like, "Oh, WrestleMania sign, you're cracked." I don't want to see that happen. Anyway,
the one thing that's kind of off about going to a live event though is not having the commentators in your ear.
Yeah.
It's just something about not having the commentators in your ear. You're watching it, you're seeing it, but you're like, something's missing.
Yep, it's the full experience, and that's why the commentary is such an integral part. Even if sometimes you kind of tune it out, but it's part of the language of the experience.
For sure.
And yeah, that is something that is slightly different, and it's why sometimes even when I will see a live show, I'll still go back and watch the taping of it just to kind of see the stuff I may have missed.
Right. That's what I would do. Like I ordered WrestleMania 2000 and told my parents, I said, I'm going to the show, but I need you to record this. Here is the tape. Record it because I want to watch it after I get back. And I watched it the next day, and with the commentary, it was so different.
Well, yeah, but I also think that speaks to the storytelling in the ring, because if you can't have access to that portion, you need to still be caught into the story, right? So
yeah,
I think they're complementary, but I think that's where you're allowed to be in the moment. Like at that Raw taping I went to, the RK Bro was in a tag match against was it Alpha Academy and Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens. And Randy Orton was it was a 40-minute match. It was crazy. It was great. But Orton was just waiting for the hot tag for 6 years in there. And the entire crowd would go nuts anytime Riddle got close to Orton. And it's you'd see this story going on. The moment that tag was made, just the roof just went off the place. And it was that was a lot of fun. It just yeah, it was I didn't need commentary to see that. We wanted to see Orton go in and start, hitting some RKOs from right in front of us.
Sure. It's definitely one of the tag teams that is exciting right now for the storyline.
Yeah, so it was that's I'm talking that's that one moment of the night where it's you're like, yep, this is transcendent. This is just so much fun, and everybody's on the same page and cheering for that one moment. So that was cool. The 3 hours after that of just talking wasn't, but whatever.
Good stuff. And what I've seen of RK Bro, they're enjoyable, but someone like me, and it's gonna sound snobby and pretentious as all fuck, but I'm an old school tag team guy, so that's why I love a team like FTR, because these are guys who have been together for a long time. They understand the rules of a tag team match, and they just work together so damn well. And it's just that old school, hard-nosed, we're just going to out-wrestle you in the ring and beat the shit out of you and get the win.
Yeah.
I mean, no flips, just fist is actually true when you watch them in the ring.
I mean, that's why I wore my FTR shirt to that Raw taping. I wanted people to know, you know.
Represent.
Yeah. So, okay. So Jeff, you brought us all here together. We've had some fun. We've learned some lessons, right? I don't know.
Right.
Actual special. So like right now, like you said, you love the tag team stuff, and I know you're watching a lot of the AEW. Is there like any new person right now, or I should say something like a performer that has kind of been a revelation to you in your recent watching that you're like, you know what, whatever this person's doing, I'm on board, and I just need to see where it goes.
There's actually two right now. And it may sound, somewhat cliche. It may sound run of the mill, but it's Darby Allin and Hangman Page. At Darby Allin, because he's one of those smaller guys, but you can see when they put him up against a bigger guy, how he goes about trying to dismantle and attack that guy. It's not just, oh, well, he's the smaller guy, he's going to punch him a lot, and oh, he won. He's going to get the shit kicked out of him, but he's going to find a way. He's going to keep getting up. It's that resiliency that I like, the tenacity that just, he's like a little chihuahua that won't give up trying to get the bone away from the bull mastiff.
I'm just happy that he found his dad again, and they're hanging out.
And as far as Adam Page, there was a match I saw early on. This is way before he was in title contention. I think it was during his tag run with Omega. JR called out that Adam Page was very much moving like Barry Windham in the ring. And I remember seeing Barry Windham wrestle, and I'm like, that's actually a good call out, because he really does have that same kind of style. Aside from him getting up and hitting a moonsault every once in a while, or, diving through the ropes with what Excalibur would have claimed to be tope suicida to the outside. Which, I fucking love Excalibur. Anyone can fucking hate me for that, but I love the guy on commentary. I think he's fun. And he knows his shit, so that's all I need.
Excalibur's great, even though I do have a gimmick hatred of Excalibur.
I can understand that. Understand that.
To roll back the curtain on that for anybody who wondered, where back in the Hossman days, the guys used to give me shit for giving Excalibur shit. Way back, the very first PWG show I ever saw, there was a mystery vortex where they don't reveal who's on the card. So it's all these interesting people come in. So I was seeing all these people, and Johnny Gargano came out, and he's a Cleveland boy. And Excalibur is friends with Johnny Gargano, but Excalibur is a Detroit boy. So Excalibur took the opportunity to talk as much shit about Cleveland as he possibly could, bringing out the old wonders like the Mistake by the Lake and all these things. He just kept tearing down Cleveland. So it's just like, okay, so Excalibur is my nemesis now.
Oh, man.
And again, there is no seriousness to it. I think that he's one of the best announcers in the game right now. I do know that some people don't like the fact that he wears a mask, how into it he is, but I love how knowledgeable he is. I love how the fact that he is undeniably a wrestling geek. And that's one of the things I greatly appreciate. It's one of the things that I also appreciate by a lot of the talent that is working right now and is currently at, kind of the apex of their career. A lot of them are around my age. And so it's the idea that, they're coming from similar cultural touchstones that I am, that the things that inspire them is the same stuff that I grew up. The fact that Mox and I, we were both born in 1985. So that's another thing that kind of gives the edge over to it, is the fact that, hey, these are guys that are my age, inspired by the same things and loving the same things that I love, out there doing awesome things.
Yeah, very much so. And now I want to take Paul's question and kind of pose it to the other guys, to the rest of you, about if there's anyone right now that is just clicking for you on all cylinders. So, we'll just go, whoever wants to chime in first and then see who goes. Let's just have at it.
What you got, Eddie?
You know what? Not really. Just because, like right now, like I was telling you guys, this because I only watch WWE at the moment, and there's just really not a lot of excitement there.
Well,
so it's
Omos isn't exciting.
So I'm kind of at this pivotal point, and that's why I've been chatting with Jeff a little bit lately about AEW and Impact Wrestling and what he thinks, and because I'm definitely planning on just starting to watch something else while still keeping up with WWE. It's just something that I always keep there. You know what I mean? If it's at a distance, whether I'm fully into it. But right now, there's just not a lot of there's a lot of silly things going on. RK Bro is one of the fun things that's going on. Brock Lesnar's back, and I gotta say, I didn't care for him much in the beginning, and I don't care for him much now, but at least now he came back and he's got a lot of development on his character now. But he's just on a tear right now with Roman Reigns again. But again, Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, we've seen it. It's a snooze fest. It's, Brock Lesnar, he does the, what do you call it? Suplex after suplex. So,
City.
Yeah.
Suplex City, bitch.
Yeah, like that's it. That's the whole match. It's not exciting, So Stone Cold's coming back for WrestleMania. That's just one of those things, The Rock comes back, Stone Cold. And you know what? I didn't see the end of Raw, but as far as I know, Seth Rollins still didn't have a match in WrestleMania, so that's going to be interesting.
Supposedly that's going to be Cody Rhodes. That's supposed to be like the.
I did hear something about possibility.
Yeah. But I'm excited for that up and comer Johnny Knoxville to.
He's got a lot of heart.
I mean, for someone, I think for as much as Knoxville has, he's given his life, for entertainment. Like, I think they're actually going to have a fun match because I think Zayn also, he's figured it out, in terms of how to be ridiculous and tell fun stories. So, yeah, I'm waiting for that young rookie, Johnny Knoxville to shine.
And then, and then I was, and then you got Logan Paul. He's going to be with the Miz.
Yeah, but two Ohio. Well, one of the Miz is his dad. His dad sells food near me. I don't know if we talked. I'm kidding. Logan Paul, he can go away. I'm fine. Those two brothers, whatever. They're around here too, but we don't need to talk about that.
No, we can.
And I was really interested in Alexa Bliss's character. She was playing a good role, and they just cut the character. They brought her back and not really brought her back yet. They're having these little therapy sessions. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the storyline on that, but they brought her back for E-Chamber, and we thought, they just brought her back. They're going to give her she's going to take the match. Not only does she lose the match, we haven't heard from her since E-Chamber. So that was a really good character. It was a really good character. So I don't know, the speculation she might go back to the old character, or who knows. But again, that's another one of those where WWE just says, you know what, we're not really sure where to go with this, so we're just going to put it on the shelf. Hopefully no one notices.
No. And the problem is they put so much time and effort into it that everyone's going to notice when she's not there. I mean, I kept up with what's going on with her story, and then they're like, oh yeah, this whole therapy thing is supposed to go to WrestleMania. Oh, but she's going to be back at Elimination Chamber, and now she's gone again. It's like, what? I don't get what's happening. Yeah. It's like, well, I'm like, you know what? I'm glad I'm not investing so many hours a week watching their product and just listening to podcasts and watching YouTube to kind of see what happens. And I'm like, okay, I didn't really need to pay attention. It's not for me.
I think my favorite up and coming guy right now is Rick Boogs, just because he's Freddie Mercury. And the guy is just awesome. I love Rick Boogs. I love the power of the guitar. And talk about that random tag team of him and Nakamura, but come on, that's a good pairing. I like those two together.
Yeah, I was disappointed he didn't make the new WWE 2K22 game.
Like Freddie Mercury, muscled out Freddie Mercury will be DLC, I'm sure. They'll add. All right. So the Goro. Who's your? Because I know you got a lot of irons in the fire in terms of people you like.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of established acts that I'm still always very excited to see what they do. I mean, the new newly minted Blackpool Combat Club of Mox and Danielson and now Regal, that is amazing. Of course, I love everything that's going on with Malachi Black and the House of Black. But in terms of kind of guys that are just getting established, at least we'll limit it to AEW because that's the one I'm watching primarily. I see a lot of potential in Swerve Strickland. And I wasn't following his run at WWE. And when he first came out, I didn't even recognize him until it was pointed out to me that he used to perform on the show that I watched, Lucha Underground, underneath as the character Killshot. And I loved him on that show. But just seeing him now, just how much raw charisma that he has, coupled with his amazing in-ring ability, there's going to be, if they don't do something big with Swerve, they're missing an opportunity because he is just so good.
Yeah, he really is. I mean, I didn't realize he was Killshot until somebody called it out, and I went, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Mm-hmm.
I was like, Killshot was one of my favorite guys when I was watching Lucha Underground, because I was like, this guy just is good.
Yeah.
And then now you see where he's able to show off more of, like you said, that natural charisma. It's just dripping off of him.
Yep, and he's filled out more. He has more weight and muscularity to him, and yeah, he is going to be something amazing if he's given the opportunity to do so. And I think that hopefully they will invest in him because I see very good things coming out of him.
Same. I don't know. Did you catch his match last night on Rampage?
Yep, that was an amazing match, and again, Ricky Starks, always impressive. You know, he also is a guy that just has it. And at no point did I think that Swerve was going to take the FTW championship. It was kind of predetermined in my mind that Ricky was walking out of that. But just the build that they're having and the setting up of the tremendous Haas match between Hobbs and Keith Lee, that's going to be amazing.
That's what I'm waiting for. I'm like, yeah, you can give me Swerve and Starks any day and I'll be happy. But you give me Hobbs and Lee, just two powerful guys in the ring, just going at it. I'm all for it. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a hell of a match when it happens.
Yep. I was almost disappointed that when they had their whole Face of the Revolution ladder match, they didn't go all in because the initial three entrants to that were what? It was Wardlow, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Keith Lee. So it's like, oh, they're going to do a big beefy boy ladder match. But then they had to put some smaller guys in there to round it off. It's like, oh, okay. But
yeah, they definitely let us on with that big beefy Haas match that we thought we were going to get, and then the smaller guys come in. I was like, okay.
Yep. Let's throw Miro into the mix and Lance Archer and just go all out. Put as much beef into the ring as you can.
That just reminds me of like the old Nintendo ice hockey game that if you picked all 5 big guys, it's like all you're gonna do is just like slowly move down the ice. Like you got to mix it up and get at least one small skatey guy around to help move things along. So I don't know. That's
if Brian Cage is still under contract, he can move remarkably well.
I was actually going to mention him. Like I didn't really realize who he was until I watched the Dark Side of the Ring on Chris Kanyon, and he was talking. I was like, who is this dude, and why is his shoulders like a separate person? Like the guy just has, I don't know, like he looks like an action figure right out of a box.
Oh yeah. Brian Cage is another one of those guys that I discovered through Lucha Underground, and there's a reason they call him the Swolverine.
Jesus. Yeah. It seems like he has a pretty good, like, at least when he was talking as part of that episode, like as a pretty good personality. So I don't know, like, I want to see more of him. Then just because it took me seeing him live and understanding a little better, Wardlow, I know he's straight to the moon. I also want to see him do more than just power bombs. I don't want him to, that's like, I get that they're setting him up as a monster, but like, I don't know, like, I know that's probably if I was playing, him as a video game character, that would just be my go-to because that's all I'd remember how to do. but I want to see I want to see more move sets. I want to see a more I wanted to see more wrestling, not just not just power bombs and then
And
chairs.
the thing is, he has the ability to do on more. It's just one of those. If you can get over doing one move, I'm not going to begrudge you for doing it, because his Powerbomb Symphony, it's over. People like it. But I'm sure that he's going to be in much more competitive matches now that they're transitioning him into more of a face role. And it still blows my mind to, see him in this position. And it speaks to what I was talking about of kind of the fun of going to independent shows, because the very first time I ever saw Wardlow in a match was in a Cleveland VFW hall for one of the smaller promotions called PCW, which I don't even think PCW is still running shows.
I don't think so, no.
Yeah. It was one of those, like Turner's Hall. You heard of that, Paul?
No.
Yeah. It's off Guthrie Avenue.
Oh.
It smells like cigarettes.
I'm sure. No, but I'm excited for him. Like I like this kind of. It's not necessarily homegrown like AEW talent, but they're the ones that are shining the spotlight on these people and bringing them in, and they're developing them and giving them ways to tell stories. I'm excited for that. The women's division's getting better too.
Yep.
Like as much as I am super happy Thunder Rosa got the belt, Britt Baker was such a good bad guy champion. She was just always exuding that I'm one step ahead of you. I thought she was great. And also I know we are personally biased because she would wrestle around here and was kind of relative to Cleveland, Pittsburgh, forget it, whatever. Just ignore that part. But yeah.
Another AIW staple.
Yeah. So I mean, for goodness sakes, I saw her in a comedy match with Hornswoggle, and I'm like, this has to be better, right?
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully.
Oh man, that's a match I wish I would have seen.
No, I don't know if you would have. It was not great. Not because of her, just whatever. But yeah, I think there's a lot of cool things coming up, right? And there's a lot of younger people or I should say like lesser known that are getting some spotlight now, especially again, there's a lot of opportunities. And like we said at the beginning, like there's so many opportunities to dig in and find cool stuff and find a relatively supportive fandom too. I don't know if we should mention that briefly. I think that you still got toxic fans no matter what it is that you're engaging in. I see a lot of there's I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of awareness and support with wrestling now that I didn't always see.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, there's still some terrible people out there. It's one of the things. If you're a wrestling fan, stay off of Twitter. Just stay off of it. But there's also a greater sense of camaraderie that you can find if you can find the good group of people that just want to celebrate wrestling, not necessarily spend their time tearing something down, but just promoting the stuff that they enjoy. That's out there too.
Yeah. And I don't know how far down the rabbit hole you guys have gone on wrestling Twitter. I happen to go on there because that's where I get some updates for stuff, regarding all things wrestling. And I stumble upon these things and I read them and I'm like, why do you put your energy into this negative stuff? Like people just tearing down, AEW for no reason other than, oh, they're just WCW. Not having watched it. Or on the flip side, we got people tearing down WWE because they're like, well, they got rid of a bunch of guys and they don't know anything and blah, blah, blah. It's like, look, there's a common bond here. We're all watching wrestling. So instead of, shitting on each other for whatever preference we have, why don't we just find that common bond and be like, okay, well, you like this, I like this. Let's discuss the differences instead of just immediately, well, you're an E-drone, so you don't know anything, or, oh, you're an AEW mark, so you don't understand anything.
I like that you want to believe that these people that are acting like this are capable of being better, and I don't know what to tell you about that.
Yeah, I know. I'm forever the optimist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the internet is full of assholes.
I have a Twitter. I don't use it because I don't know. It's not that it's not confusing. I'm not that old, but it's just I'm like, I already have a social media. Why do I need other ones? But whatever. So I don't do that. I would say I'm going to throw a recommendation out to you, Eddie, that I know you like the WWE. I have fallen down. There's a playlist of videos on YouTube I mentioned that What Culture Wrestling group. Like I said, they're out of the UK. This guy named Simon Miller is very knowledgeable and very entertaining. He does a retro ups and downs review of like pay-per-views. And they're like 20-minute videos, and he goes through like the card, explains the context, and it's just like you learn, and you're like, oh wow, like this is exciting. Not exciting is not the right thing, but it's like I feel like I actually get information and I'm entertained. And every week he puts out a new one, and I'm excited. Like, what's he reviewing this week? And he goes from some of the greatest things to what was it? Heroes of Wrestling, one of the worst pay-per-views ever made, right?
Terrible.
Yeah, and then he also covered what was it? The WCW New Blood Rising, which is like the worst. Like, so he gets some some really stinkers in there too. But it's just it's a good way to kind of like not backfill your knowledge, but if you're feeling kind of nostalgic, without having to spend 4 hours watching a pay-per-view, it's been really cool. Like this is where I've been getting some of my knowledge and some of my love again for certain things that, you know, it's been great. Like sometimes somebody explain it to me better than me just sitting down and trying to watch it, you know?
Right on. Appreciate the rec. I already subbed on it right now.
Yeah, it's
check that out.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I've gone down that rabbit hole with What Culture and Simon Miller stuff, and I also check out the Wrestle Talk channel because they're another UK-based wrestling thing. And
yep, they all used to be part of the same group. What Culture, right. Cultaholic, and Wrestle Talk, or at least members of them.
Yeah.
Do you subscribe to the Impact Plus, or how do you watch Impact?
I just check out the highlights on YouTube right now. I think they're also available on Access TV because we have Dish Network here, but I never.
Oh, you have access?
I've never checked to see when it's actually on, so I'm just keeping up with updates when I go on to YouTube and stuff. Is basically how I'm keeping up with Impact.
Yeah, and I've also mentioned Major League Wrestling puts up a lot of their matches on YouTube as well. If you want to see, like I'm, you know, Matt Cross is part of that. He's great.
Oh yeah.
So, you know,
another Cleveland guy.
Yeah, another Cleveland guy, but he's great. What was it? Son of Havoc on
yep.
Son of Havoc.
There you go. And there's some names that you would know, and like they put on a good product. So if you were trying to find full matches on YouTube, they have them up there for free. So there's
what was that one called?
Major League Wrestling MLW.
Major League Wrestling. Right on.
Yeah, I watched a match not too long ago from MLW. It was Tom Lawler versus Mil Muertes.
Oh, I love Mil Muertes.
Jesus Christ, that was brutal.
Yep, and filthy Tom Lawler, Dirty Daddy.
Yeah.
Oh no, different guy.
Yeah. Guy looks like he just never takes a shower. I don't know how you could physically look. It looks like if Pigpen had an older, nastier brother. I don't understand.
So this has been a great conversation. I don't want to keep you guys here too much longer because I know you guys have other things going on. But I appreciate you all taking time out of your days to come here.
Of course, man.
But I do have one more thing I want to ask you guys. And we'll go around the table. You guys can each answer, and then I'll give my thoughts here. Is there anyone that was your favorite wrestler growing up that you would want to see, like fantasy book a match with that favorite wrestler with somebody modern? And whoever wants to start, go right ahead.
That's an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Partially because a lot of the guys that I really liked growing up are either dead or not so much in wrestling shape these days.
Right.
You know what? I'd actually say, give me a. I'm trying to think.
I'll throw one out. How about that?
Go for it.
Because I just feel like they'd be like mirror images of each other in a lot of ways. Like I want Bret Hart and Adam Cole. That'd be great.
That would be pretty awesome.
Despite the fact I know El Goro thinks Adam Cole has the body of a 12-year-old.
He looks like a child, okay? But you know what? He seems like a really nice guy.
But he brings the boom and dresses up like Halo Men. You know, like
yes, he does. He dresses up like John Haloman.
Yeah, but I just think his style. I think he's very adaptive, and I think he would do such a great job of telling a story. Like I just think that would be. I think Bret Hart would just. I mean, he excelled at the time, but my God, like the wrestling caught up to him finally. You know, in a lot of ways.
I feel like John Moxley versus Randy Macho Man Savage
if we're talking
Yeah.
about, not even like, just a fantasy matchup, that would be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, in terms of if opening it up to people that are deceased, then yeah, that would be good. But in terms of what could possibly happen, still alive, I'd actually would go with Mox and Stone Cold. Just have an all-out brawl.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would be interesting.
Well, we'll see how he handles Kevin Owens, and then we can...
Less so these days because Mox justifiably is no longer drinking, but still.
Well, I mean, you can.
There we go. Hangman and Stone Cold. They can have a beer afterwards.
I like that.
Yeah, we're gonna send Hangman back down the road of drinking his feelings, huh?
No. See, you can have a beer without letting it consume you. So he came right to the edge.
All right, so
Jeff, his friends in the Dark Order pulled him out.
What's your booking?
See, I've been thinking here, and I posed the question, and it's a tough one for me to really try and put together, because there's so many that I watched growing up.
Like, what about Sting versus Young Sting? How do you feel about
that? Well, wait a minute. How young a Sting are we talking? Are we talking Blade Runner Sting, or are we talking?
I'm talking like still like he looks like a surfboard. Like I'm talking happy up, like upbeat Sting versus sad dad Sting.
Okay, so we're talking Surfer Sting saved by RoboCop, right? Jesus Christ. You know what? Honestly, man, this is tough. I posed the question and I can't even put anything together.
Another one I would throw out there is like young, like prime Undertaker versus like Malachi Black. Like those are the two guys that I just want to see. They would destroy an arena.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
And are you talking all time? Because I didn't even think about I was just thinking all time. So like Dead or Alive, like what?
I don't know.
I mean, if we were to take Dead or Alive, man, Roddy Piper versus MJF.
Oh, there we go. Oh,
I mean, the promos alone would just be amazing.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh man, shit. Yeah, I put it out there. I didn't even think. Yeah, it could have been Dead or Alive. Anyone.
Mostly because you said from childhood, so I was thinking it was kind of like no holds barred on who it would be.
You know what? I'm gonna go weird. I'm gonna go a little off base here. I think anyway is what I'm doing, and it just kind of popped in my head. I think I would want to see Bret Hart in his prime taking on Daniel Garcia right now.
Ooh, that'd be a good one.
Because I mean, both guys very technical in the ring, and I see
excellence of execution.
I see a lot of those submission holds in Garcia, and I see a lot of that like technical prowess that Bret had in his prime. And I just think it would be just such a good, solid technical match.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, to that level, if we want to go with what I lovingly referred to as grapple fuck matches, Regal versus Minoru Suzuki. Oof. Put both of them in their prime and just let them beat the living shit out of each other.
Oh my God.
If you want to, still one of the most brutal matches I've ever seen, and it was somewhat of a throwaway match, but it was in WCW. It was Fit Finlay versus William Regal, and they just decided, we're just going to forearm each other for real for like 15 minutes.
That's not surprising considering those guys.
Oh yeah, and they had been doing that many times in their entire career. They just decided, all right, we're in the middle of peak NWO. Let's just kill each other.
So like, what about Vader, like before he came to WWF and like like those two together?
That would be amazing.
Wow.
If only there was a video game that was out there now that we could maybe have some of this happen. I don't know.
There is. There are many video games that we could do this with.
You can pretty much make any character now.
Let's all play Fire Pro.
Yeah, I have Fire Pro, and I'm still trying to figure out the goddamn controls on that thing.
wrestling left me behind after Pro Wrestling, the Nintendo game, where I'm like, if I'm not Starman, I can't do anything. So
I think I think you would enjoy the Fire Pro series. It is surprisingly deep. The thing is it is simple, but there is a lot of complexity to it, and it's all 2D sprites.
Okay, well that's my jam. I could probably
there you go.
Yeah, it's a cool game. Like I said, I'm just trying to figure out the controls because I always get my ass handed to me.
Hey, the only time I ever won when I was playing against the other Hossman is when they were using a custom character, and apparently the stats were all maxed out, but nobody realized that. It just we were having this huge like 8-man exploding barbed wire deathmatch, exploding ring type thing, and then at the end it shows how people got eliminated, and it was just all of this one guy's finisher because I was just spamming the finisher.
Oh man.
Did you happen to pick up the new 2K22, or have you been playing PS4 lately?
No, I've basically been using it for media. I don't want to tax it too much with gameplay because I got to replace the thermal paste because now even though I opened it up and gave it a thorough cleaning, got all the dust out and everything, it still sounds like a jet engine. So
yeah,
and
after you fully take it apart, you're going to find a lot more dust in there. I've taken a lot of them apart.
Yeah, luckily YouTube saves my ass on that. You know, aside from providing such good wrestling content and news, I can figure out how to fix my PS4. Because I ain't getting my hands on a fucking PS5 anytime soon.
Yeah, right. No, I held off on getting to the 2K22 just because, like, I don't know. I feel like I'd be like, oh, you know, this would be kind of fun, but I'm like, I have to wait 18 hours for, you know, to download a patch or whatever. And then, like, $60 right now is a little price too high for something I don't feel confident that would be that engaged in, you know?
Yeah, and that's fair because 2K22 up to this point have been very lazy with the games.
Yeah.
They took a year off and decided, you know what, they just go back to the drawing board, and they just took a year off completely. Didn't make a 2K21. And this one is arguably better. It doesn't crash all the time like 2K20 did. I'm a PC player, so it's on PC. 2K20 just crashes constantly. So this game's actually been stable. So surprisingly, content's the same. They changed the controls up a little bit, but it's cool. It's fun. You know, I'm not a competitive in that regard. I don't go online and compete and that kind of stuff. I just play, make up my own matches and just play. Otherwise, I'll get my ass beat.
Yeah. The last wrestling game I purchased, as far as WWE goes, or main wrestling games, was 2K18. And the biggest draw for me was creating your own wrestler. So I'm like, why not live out the fantasy of creating my own wrestler and seeing how far they can get?
Yeah, create your own stuff, and you make your own pay-per-views and all that. It's fun.
As far as any new wrestling games, I don't think I'm going to get 2K22. I think I'm going to hold my dollars until that AEW game comes out.
Oh, is there one coming out? Nice.
Yeah, they've been in development with it for a fair bit of time, but
here's hoping.
Yeah. Well, the one good thing behind it is because Kenny Omega is such a big gamer, I have confidence that he's wanting the game to be as good as it can be. I mean, he even said it's not going to compete with the WWE games, but they want to give the fans something good to play. He's like, we're never going to be on that level, but we want to provide a fun game where people can play as their favorite wrestlers or create their own wrestlers, whatever, but just have fun playing the game.
Well,
so we'll see
who they go with. I mean, it's obviously not going to be like EA Sports or anything, but I'm sure if they do make a game and then EA or someone looks at it and says, hey, you know what, we can do this. We can take this game on and enhance it and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who they're working with.
I believe they're working with Ukes.
Yeah, with
left
Ukes.
The WWE partnership. Yeah.
Oh, Ukes. They actually worked on the first UFC, so that's good news.
And they brought in. They also brought in the guy who designed No Mercy back in the day as some sort of consultant, I believe.
Yeah, which is a game I never played, but I've seen gameplay of it, and I'm like, okay, I can see why so many people hold this in high regard.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like I'll be excited. Like, and then maybe I'll advance my gameplay and move up to a 3-dimensional wrestling game. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
Oh man, this has been a lot of fun, guys. I've had a lot of fun. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I've enjoyed myself.
This was a blast, man. Thank you.
Definitely.
Always wanted to get on and just talk about wrestling.
It's always fun. Always fun. And I mean, we all have an appreciation for it. And we all just have this, I think, respect for the business as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that I don't see in some of the fandom. I mean, we talked about Twitter. But I just want to get like your guys' final thoughts here on wrestling in general. Like, do you see it ever becoming as big as it was at one point, like say in the Attitude Era or when the Monday Night Wars were going on, or do you see it just being a niche thing going forward? I mean, whoever wants to jump on this can.
The possibility of it becoming as big as that is there's a lot stacked against it because there are so many other media options available. You know, there is so many things competing for the eyeballs, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be as, you know, quote unquote, as big as it is, as long as it's still managing to capture new fans and capture the love of the people that have been into it for the longest time. I don't think wrestling is ever going to go anywhere for that very same reason. There's always going to be some kid who's discovering it for watching his first wrestling match and thinking, yeah, this is my thing. And sometimes they go on to be wrestlers, you know. It will be forever.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, you know, in the age of social media, there's just so much out there. And now you actually literally have social media stars coming into the WWE. You know, you always get the silly WrestleMania guests anyways, but now it's, you know, it's getting down to social media. Those are actually, you know, what do you call it? Mild celebrities, you know, basically. So I don't think it has to ever be that big, like he was saying. It's just going to be one of those things. I think it's become a lot more mainstream. Back to what we were saying about how, you know, you like wrestling, you're a nerd. You know, it's one of those things where I would say it's becoming mainstream now. So.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, especially when you had shows like Glow, which should have had a 4th season, and then I know there's the Heels on Stars, which I need to watch. I've heard nothing but good things about. It's permeating, like, you know, I mean, the WWF made it a point in the 80s to make wrestling more than just wrestling by, you know, how they did everything, right? Like toys and cartoons and everything. It's only going to get, that wake's only going to get bigger as we go along, right? So, in terms of like pure ratings, I don't think they're going to be like that because, like, you know, streaming and smaller cable size, you know, ratings, whatever. But I think in terms of like cultural impact and awareness, I think it's as big as it's ever been, you know? And I also think that, like, since people keep seeking out, like, especially after like these couple years of the pandemic, like, you know, going, like, I went to my first concert and, like, was it last weekend for the first time in like 3 years, I went to go see live music and it was great. There's something there. I think as long as there's going to be these live shows, people want something tangible that just isn't like, you know, digital content, right? So I think wrestling's always going to be there because, you know, it just, there's a physical connection there. Just like when people go to like sporting events, right? Like sometimes it's better to go see it live. I think wrestling is going to be the same thing. I think it's great to be able to love heroes and villains and be able to argue with people about them, but not be like divisive. Because I feel like there's so many things now that you could say something and be like, well, we're never going to talk again because of however your position about X and my position about Y. But wrestling is just to argue about, right? You can't be like, wait, you're a fan of that guy? You're not welcome in my house. You know, like you can't. So I think there's a comfort there, and I think will be a growing appreciation that people can still get together and enjoy a thing and still have spirited discussion about, like, you know, whatever, but it not be a thing that's going to alienate you from somebody else. So I think, you know, that benefit, I think wrestling is going to be, it's going to be greatly, it's going to be more widespread in the sense of It's one of the few things that outside of Twitter people can talk about and not like go away being like, oh man, that just ruined my day. You know. Well, here's hoping, right?
Right. And I feel the same way. I don't think it's ever going to reach those levels again, but I think it's pretty much going to stay where it's at. And with, the new kid on the block in AEW, and then we're getting Ring of Honor going to be coming back. So there's other outlets for wrestling for people to watch aside from just the big, juggernaut that is WWE. I mean, and all the international stuff too, and even the promotions that are strictly women-focused promotions, even those have a lot of popularity. I don't particularly watch them, and it's not because I don't want to. It's just I haven't had the exposure to go see them. I do need to broaden my horizons a little more on that front, but I think pro wrestling now is probably as big as it'll get. It may get a little bigger, but it's never going to reach that height that it was. I think that was lightning in a bottle at that time. One thing I do like as far as AEW goes is I like that they're run by a guy who is obviously another wrestling nerd, who is a student of the game, understands things, and from what I've heard, listening to interviews that AEW does, they do this unrestricted podcast with some of the wrestlers and backstage guys. Anytime they bring up Tony Khan, it's like some of these guys who have just signed, they're like, yeah, the first thing he did was like, oh, I remember you in this match versus this guy, and you guys went blah, 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 blah. And they're like, I don't even remember that match. How do you? He was like, oh, it was such a great match. I'm like, okay, this is a guy that needs to be running a wrestling promotion, a guy who understands things. That being said, AEW is not without its faults. They're not perfect, but no wrestling promotion can be. But I think with that behind it, AEW can still grow bigger. It's going to be nowhere near WWE levels, but I think they can capture a portion of that audience, and especially now that they've got Ring of Honor under their belt, and that's going to be something. I think wrestling is going to be around for a long time, and I'm excited for the new generation of fans that are going to start seeing this stuff and then go back and see the old stuff and get that knowledge. If they go back, even if they don't, as long as they watch the newer stuff, great, enjoy it.
Yep. So what you're saying is wrestling is good, wrestling is great, and we should all watch wrestling. I think that's what you're saying there, right?
That's what I heard.
It's a good note to go out on.
To quote one of my favorites when I was a teenager, and that's the bottom line. Yeah, so again, I thank you guys for coming on and doing this, taking time out of your busy schedules to join me for this just roundtable discussion, shooting the shit about wrestling. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys, this shouldn't have to be said, but I'm going to say it. You have an open door policy. You ever want to come back, whatever you want to talk about, feel free to hit me up. I mean, you're always welcome.
I want it to be an open forbidden door policy where I'll just show up unannounced and create chaos. Like you'll be in the middle of like a conversation with your wife and it's like, why did I get hit with a chair? And I'll just leave.
I mean, chaos already exists. It's a faction in New Japan. So are you a part of chaos now?
I can't.
I think everybody's a part of chaos. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I have a membership, but I have to check that.
We'll see.
I mean, I would have figured you more as a Suzuki-gun guy.
I am 100% Suzuki-gun, which is why it's curious, and I'm also part of chaos. I don't know. We have to sort that out.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you. This is a lot of fun. It's always fun to talk about things that we have vested interest in, and wrestling. There's plenty of opportunities to talk about it, but not everybody around me, like my day to day, aka my wife and cats, don't want to talk about it. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So to close out, I'm just going to go around the table here. Eddie, do you have anything that you want to promote or anything you're doing?
No, I don't do anything. I'm boring.
All right, then I'll toss it over to Paul, and then we'll hear from El Goro. Promote away.
Sure. You can find me talking at length about many, many things over at Invasion the Podcast with my co-host Steve. We recently discovered, the 87 animated film G.I. Joe, the film or the movie. Go check that out. Invasion of the Podcast. Spoiler, that's not a very good movie. Didn't
No.
but it did like Sergeant Slaughter as himself. So I like that was the credit, and also that we now know if you get stabbed by a snake staff, you just go into a coma, and we learned all these things. So you can check us out there. We talk at length about a bunch of different things. It's quite silly, but I think we have a good time. And then also I do the show called Strange Highways, which my co-host Terry and I have been watching the Twilight Zone, the original series, and now into the 80s series in sequence and talking about the show. And we're now into season 1 of the 80s series, and we're about to cover the William Friedkin segment called Nightcrawlers, which is it is a trip and a half. So you guys can check that out, Strange Highways. Then that's also fun. Not as silly at times because it's a shorter show.
Nice. El Goro, you have the stage.
All right. Well, I do a weekly movie podcast called Talk Without Rhythm, where every week I discuss 2 films that are somehow tied together, tangentially tied together by a theme. Right now, we've been going through a lot of the Patreon picks, so the very generous people who support the show, booking the episodes. And the one that we have coming up shortly after I finish talking with you guys is a little creature double feature of 2008's The Ruins and a 2020 Russian film called Super Deep. So that should be a lot of fun. And yeah, just do a search for Talk Without Rhythm. Basically anywhere you can get podcasts, you can find me there.
Awesome. I'll include links for your guys' shows in the show notes for anybody. Go check these guys out. They're excellent at what they do. El Goro is one of the main inspirations for me to start doing this. And once again, guys, thank you. And I think we're going to call that a show.
Hell yeah.
Ring the bell. We're done.
I'm not kicking out. I'm done.
Ding, ding.
So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. That was the Skewered Universe Wrestling Show. And as you can tell, we had a lot of fun, despite the few technical hiccups that we had. I want to once again thank Eddie, my longtime friend, for coming on the show. Also, he is the one that designed our new logo. So, big ups to him for doing that. And I definitely need to thank Paul from Invasion of the Podcast and Strange Highways for coming on. And definitely need to thank first-time guest, and hopefully future guest, El Goro from Talk Without Rhythm. Having these 3 guys together was a lot of fun. I know initially I said there would be 4. Unfortunately, our 4th person was unable to make it, so we're going to have him on in a later episode. But, for now, you know what you can do? You can contact us at skewerduniversepodcast@gmail.com. Leave us some comments, feedback, questions, whatever you feel like. You can find us over on Facebook. We're on Twitter and Instagram. Just search for Skewered Universe or @SkeweredU. You'll find us. Facebook, there's a group, there's a page. Go there. As far as Facebook goes, you can also go there and look for Talk Without Rhythm. You can find his group. You can also find Invasion of the Podcast and Strange Highways on Facebook. You can also find them on Apple Podcasts. I believe they're also on Stitcher, places like that. I'll link their shows in the notes, as I said previously. And if you want to support us here at Skewered Universe, you can go over to patreon.com/Skewered Universe Podcast. You can join our Patreon program, get access to exclusive transmissions episodes. There will be new ones coming. And we'll get hard at work on those commentaries, believe me. Behind the scenes, there's a lot going on here. Also, our show is available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Audible, Google, all the regular places. So when you're looking for us, go ahead and do a search for Talk Without Rhythm, Invasion of the Podcast, and Strange Highways. Again, I had a lot of fun with these guys. I need to thank them once again for coming on the show. We had a lot of fun. And as a little extra treat for you guys, we have a little bonus clip. Now, I teased at the beginning of the show, and I'm breaking kayfabe. I know that's a huge no-no in the wrestling world. I said Leanne was out with an injury after pulling a moonsault off of a steel cage. Well, she's actually fine. She was in the vicinity when we were recording, and she brought up a topic that, we all kind of dove into a little bit. So I'm going to play that for you here at the end to close out the show. And of course, you all are thanked, you're loved, stay safe, be good to each other. R.I.P. Scott Hall. And actually, we just found out R.I.P. Taylor Hawkins, the drummer from the Foo Fighters, passed away last night at age 50. Yeah, also succumbed to some demons he had. So, yeah, sad times. But, despite all that, look for the positive. There's a silver lining out there for everybody. And keep enjoying that universe that's just a bit... Hell, at this point, you know what I'm going to say. Skewered. Actually, the funny thing, and I'll bring this up because she asked me to make sure that I brought this up when talking about wrestling. While my wife enjoys it, Leanne has a hang-up about crotches.
Okay.
So if she sees what she dubs a good one, she's like, oh, crotch. And then that throws me off my game, and then all I can see in the match is crotches.
All right, so we have to unpack this. What constitutes a good crotch?
Leanne, what constitutes a good crotch?
If I can't see any detail,
no.
Great.
Ah, okay. So we want the dancer's bowl.
The more
it's just
detail,
uniform.
The more distracted I am, and that's all I can see.
I see. Okay. So Ken doll is good. Amorphous blob is less good, and then full scrotum neck is good. Is terrible.
So he says.
We're translating.
If I remember this correctly, because it was too damn funny. Oh, how did you phrase it again?
Ken doll is good.
Ken doll is good.
Yes.
Amorphous blob is slightly less good.
Amorphous blob is slightly less good.
That's better. Yeah, it's fine.
Full scrotum neck is the worst.
Full scrotum neck is the worst.
Okay.
You don't
so
want to see
one
no
of the
side
worst
pipe going on.
offenders is, I'm going to be an asshole, and I'm sorry that we're recording, but it's the only way I can identify him. He's black and like really tall.
Titus O'Neil.
Titus O'Neil. That man has a sausage and he cannot hide it. I cannot see him wrestling. Is he a good wrestler? I have no clue.
That's
All
why
I
he's
can
called.
see is his
He's called Titus Worldwide for a
sausage.
reason.
Emphasis on the wide.
Worldwide. Yeah.
Said he's called Titus Worldwide for a reason, and El Goro said emphasis on the wide.
Well, the funny part about all this is I've been there for these. We've watched several WWEs together, and even my wife can attest. Leanne brought up the crotches that she.
She always mentions the crotches.
Yeah, it's quite hilarious.
Yeah, she noticed when Brock Lesnar was aroused during a match.
Oh,
and also noted when Daniel Bryan, as he was known in the E, because that's where he was at the time, had his untrimmed man bush showing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
all natural.
I mean,
yeah.
I didn't know
Even
that.
a little bit untrimmed. It was like 70s bush.
I didn't realize that we would have to be like. I should have studied a lot more crotches before today's episode. I would have.
Well,
I would have done my.
I at least thought we would have started with nip slips or something. I didn't think we were going to go right to crotches.
Look, she asked me to bring it up. I wanted to present it to the forum here before we got into the actual episode.
Well, it is useful occasionally to get that sort of perspective, because I've been watching wrestling so long that the idea of essentially, two guys in underwear and boots grappling with each other, it doesn't even ping anymore. It's just like, yeah, that's wrestling. That's how it is. But it's always interesting to see the outsider perspective and just say, why are these guys almost naked? It's like, because they are. It's wrestling.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the way I see it.
But just the idea of, could you imagine being out in public in just your underwear and a pair of boots? Maybe some wrist tape.
I can't even do that in my own house. I would not.